injection. It's definitely harder when you've got something that is reading and writing neurons, that's generating a current pulse and reading current pulses. That's a little harder.
Joe Rogan asked Elon about the risk of rejection. Now, the idea here is that Neuralink is going to be implanting a device into the skull, opening the skull up, and implanting a device that goes into the brain. It is a common concern people are aware of, that when you implant something into the human body, the body might reject the implant. And Elon pretty much dismissed that concern. He said there's some potential for concern, particularly because the implant will be reading and writing to neurons, and that could create issues. This is just a quick description of how it's done.
Take out a chunk of skull, put the Neuralink device in there, stitch it up, and you wouldn't even know that somebody has it.
Our aim is to simplify the procedure, down to the injection of local anesthetic, a very small opening in the skin, painless opening in the skull below, quick and precise placement of threads into the cortex, and then we fill that hole in the skull with the sensor, allowing the scalp to be closed up. Behind the ear, we'll make a small incision to insert the coil. We will tunnel tiny wires under the scalp to connect the sensors to the coil.
There's more to it.
It's kind of like a hearing aid, actually.
Shortly, but Rogan, of course, in his fashion of trying to find a way of explaining it to monkey
It's an
brains,
amplification, whereas this
compares
is
it
reading
to
and
ice
writing.
fishing in the next clip.
Okay, so you take this 1-inch diameter, like ice fishing.
Replace that, say, 1-inch diameter piece of the skull with this Neuralink device that has a battery and Bluetooth and a conductive charger. You gotta insert the electrodes, so the electrodes are very carefully inserted with a robot that we developed.
We developed this robot that can rapidly and precisely insert hundreds of individual threads representing thousands of distinct electrodes into the cortex in less than an hour. This tool allows a surgeon to aim between the blood vessels that cover the surface of the brain with micron scale precision. As you can see, the brain's surface moves with the heartbeat and breathing.
Wow.
The robot tracks and adjusts for this movement. Using this tool, we can greatly reduce the risk of harming cortical vessels and causing bleeding.
Very carefully putting in the electrodes and avoiding any veins or arteries. Doesn't create trauma.
Electrodes will be inserted and they will find their way
Like tiny
to
wires, basically.
tiny wires.
Tiny wires.
And they'll find their way to specific areas of the brain to stimulate.
No, you literally put them where they're supposed to go.
How long will that wire be?
3 millimeters.
There's a lot in that segment you just saw. One thing that really stood out to me is that these wires are going to be only 2 to 3 millimeters long. That's basically 1/10 of an inch or smaller. And that is incredibly small, and I was really surprised by that. I thought, well, isn't the brain a lot bigger than that? Wouldn't you need to go a lot deeper? So I looked it up, and Wikipedia says the cerebral cortex is only 2 to 4 millimeters thick. So it turns out that for most of these threads, they won't have to insert them that far, which is pretty amazing. There's different parts of our brain, and the central part of our brain, as I understand it, and I'm not a neuroscientist, but the central part of our brain is more basic functions, and the cerebral cortex, which is where our thinking
Prefrontal cortex,
occurs,
frontal
a lot of
lobe,
higher level processing occurs.
connects with the limbic
It turns
system.
out that a lot of that stuff is really close to the edge of our brain, so it turns out fairly easy to reach that with the electrodes that they would be implanting with the Neuralink device.
Mind blowing.
As Elon mentions